conversation that we shall be having on the progress of Uganda's oil and gas sector on its available opportunities. Brought to you, of course, by the Natural Resources Cluster of the Uganda Law Society. We are today very honored and privileged that you've taken the time out to join us from wherever you are hearing us from. We will inform you that we are streaming live on YouTube as well. And we are privileged to have as our guests, Mr. Peter Mulisa, who is the Chief Legal and Corporate Affairs Officer and Company Secretary of the Uganda National Oil Company. I think, Peter, I've got that right.
Yes, Edison. Good afternoon.
Peter, of course, good afternoon, Peter. As you all know, Peter has a breadth of experience in the oil and gas sector that many of us know and that have not necessarily run into. He is, of course, safe to say that apart from being the Chief Corporate and the Legal Officer of the Uganda National Oil Company, he also has a Master's of Law in petroleum taxation and finance. Peter, you correct me if I'm wrong, from the University.
That's right.
We're also joined by Mr. Ali Sekatawa, who is the Director of Legal and Corporate Affairs of the Director of Legal and Corporate Affairs of the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. He also has a Master of Laws from the University of Dundee in Oil and Gas Law and Policy. If I am right, Ali, please correct me.
Right.
Ali, Peter, you are most welcome to what we hope will be a 1-hour conversation on this cluster, brought to you by the cluster of the Uganda Law Society. We have a very good attendance, very good membership who is present. The structure of our conversation is going to be quite simple and basic. We'll ask to talk about Eacop, but I think we will try and broaden the conversation beyond the Eacop. For those who know, on those who don't, Uganda discovered oil many years ago, and we are building a pipeline, which is 1,443 kilometers from Hoima to the port at Tanga. We're looking at constructing a refinery. We are building, or we are right now at the development phase of oil fields that are very interesting, and we have interesting developments are being undertaken in the country as we speak. Uganda is going to see first oil by 2025, hopefully, and a lot of work is being done. And at the heart of the operation are members of the Uganda Law Society, Mr. Ali Sekatawa and Mr. Peter Mulisa. They are driving the thing. Their hearts are beating with Ugandan oil right now. Their veins are flowing with the progress and of the projects. Their brains are oozing with knowledge, and their hearts are open to sharing. So they are here to give as much information as they possibly can. And so we'll go straight into it, and we'll start with you, Ali. What's happening? Give us a status update on the oil projects, not just the Eacop as well, but the entire value chain of the project, so we have a good understanding, unless they're not connected. So just kindly help us with that. Over to you, Ali.
Okay. Thank you, Ellison. Good afternoon, colleagues, and my fellow panelists, Peter, and the other organizers of the cluster. For me, it's always an honor to be amongst my colleagues and give update of what is happening for two major reasons. One is that I received many inquiries from very many people across the spectrum. Some of them have never even been to school, business people and so on. And therefore it is my obligation to make sure that the Law Society members are on the same level with every member of the society, so that we all move together. The second is that this project is actually a national project. It is for all of us as Ugandans. So I prefer that we first remove our hats as lawyers and first look at the project as Ugandans. So that's why primarily I'm excited to be here. One, to share the highlights. I have made a presentation before, But from February 2022, when the final investment decision was made, that final investment decision was on 3 flagship projects. One is the Kingfisher, and the second is Tilenga, and the third is the Eacop, which is the subject of today's discussion. Why Kingfisher and Tilenga? Because Eacop is just a transportation means. It is just a means of transport, just like a lorry, just like a train, or an aeroplane. So the Eacop is just a pipeline to transport crude, but the actual crude, its extraction is being done under the flagship of Tilenga and Kingfisher. And therefore, what is happening in respect to the extraction? Because for the Eacop to be there, there must be crude to be transported. As you are aware, we have 2 companies leading this effort, one of them being Eacop, and the other being Total. Total is a French company, but in those areas they are operating, Eacop has a 15% backing, and therefore it's part of that consortia also. So for Tilenga, where it is operating in Bulisa, as I speak now, there are 3 rigs that are supposed to start the extraction of crude. 2 of those rigs are in the country and they have been assembled, and one of them has actually started drilling. And the good news is that when the scientists, for all the time we've been hearing, when we say we have oil, it's like a pregnant woman. The scans were showing there is oil under. Some of this oil is 7 kilometers down. So the scans were showing us there is oil. But now when the drilling starts, it is to go and actually reach the actual well and see, is it there? The good news is that it is there, because now the machines have reached in the reservoirs down and confirmed. So 1 rig, they have started drilling, the other one has been assembled, and the third is still on the high seas. There's a processing facility that is being constructed for purposes of cleaning. That, again, the work is almost 70 to 80% in respect of the different pieces that make up. The third are what are called flow lines. Where the well is, they do a flow line, which is like a straw that will be removing the crude once it is pumped into a processing facility. Again, construction of those flow lines is also ongoing. And then there are also other pipelines from Bulisa to this side, where preliminary works have started. When you go the other side now of the lake, near Lake Albert, where there is a Kingfisher, Eacop, again, what they call spudding, which is actually the start of the drilling, was in January. And again, the good news is that the oil was found intact as per the scanning studies that have been been done. The other constructions of the facilities, because also there is a central processing facilities, flow lines, and so on, is ongoing, and it is on schedule. And the land acquisition processes, that side is almost done, 99%. This side of Tilenga, we are around 97%, with a few complaints here and there that are being handled. When you go to Eacop, which, as Edison said, is the pipeline from Hoima to Tanga, Eacop is supposed now to transport the crude after the sharing point. When crude is brought, as you know by law, it belongs to all Ugandans as long as it is under, and government holds it on behalf of everyone. But we've entered production sharing agreements with these companies to extract it at their cost. Then when we reach the sharing point, we share based on the costs that have been incurred. So at that point in Hoima is where Eacop starts to transport. And at that point, Uganda shares and hands over to UNOC to transport on its behalf. through that pipeline to go and sell. So that pipeline, the major contracts have been concluded. The works have started, but majorly, the major works have started in Tanga. Why? Because Tanga is near the coast. From an engineering point and logistical point, it is better to start from that side because all the things are coming via the coast, and therefore as they come this side. So most of the work at the Tanga port and all the other areas, preliminary works have started is almost 70%. As they start the works here, land acquisition here is almost again above 93, 94%. In Tanzania, around 99%. The other 6% are issues where there are still disagreements and so on. So the other studies are also moving on. There are engineering studies in UK, in China, and so on. And they are all above 60 to 70%. So far, in respect of the 3 integrated projects, I should tell the members that we are on course. And actually, some of the components are above schedule because the aim is that we should have first oil by 2025. And we are on course for that timeline because, as I indicated, it was broken down in 3 major projects and all of them are moving. Thank you, Ellison. I think that's the overall brief I can give in terms of progress.
Thank you, Ali, for that very concise brief. I think we are now clear. The project is on course. The acquisition for the land of the pipeline is being done. The studies are being done. The rigs are there. The baby scan has been seen. And now we're at this point of where the midwives are asking the mother to push. So the next midwife I will ask to come in at this point is Mr. Peter Mulisa. Peter, if you could tell us about the projects that UNOC is participating in. I think Ali has given us a high-level overview of what's happening in the sector, but where is UNOC in the entire game that he has been telling us, and how are the projects themselves progressing from the perspective of the National Oil Company?
Good afternoon, colleagues and learned friends. It's always a pleasure speaking to our colleagues and hopefully interesting everyone enough to participate in this sector. I think for a while, we spoke about oil and gas, and many people didn't believe this was a real investment. Many didn't believe that these assets were actually, these developments were actually happening. But as we speak now, more than $7 billion has been invested. And it's going to increase to about 12 billion in real investment. And so there's a chance to participate, and I think we'll be discussing the opportunities that are available to all of us today and in the coming years. But coming back to the question, Edison, just permit me to circle back and look at the governance framework of oil and gas in Uganda, so that I place UNOC, I place PAU, and then I can go into the details of what UNOC does. So the governance structure of oil and gas in Uganda, which comes from the 2 major laws that were enacted in 2013, the upstream law and the midstream law. We had an existing downstream law that was enacted in 2003. So these laws structure how oil and gas is managed in this country from upstream. Upstream is exploration, development, and production of crude oil. Midstream deals with transportation, conversion, refining, storage of crude oil, while downstream deals with distribution of refined products and storage. So when you go to those 3 laws, in the upstream, as well as midstream, we have 3 key players. So we have the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development that does policy and licensing, plays policy and licensing roles. So the minister and her team, different directorates, will support upstream and midstream in terms of policy and licensing. Now, the next entity is the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, where my land brother Ali works. Now, that entity, the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, regulates the upstream and midstream segments of the oil and gas sector. So Ali is my regulator. Now, when it comes to Uganda National Oil Company, we are a limited liability company, and our role is purely commercial. So we represent the commercial interests of the state in the oil and gas sector from upstream to downstream. And so in essence, we play in the marketplace. We work with the market players in the upstream, in the midstream, and in the downstream segments of the petroleum value chain. Now, going to the questions that we do. So in terms of establishment, Eacop was established under the two laws I spoke about in 2013, the upstream and midstream laws, but we are also regulated under the Downstream Act. And our mandate is broadly to represent government's commercial interests in the petroleum value chain. Currently, we have a list of projects that we're involved in. Ali has updated us on Kingfisher and Tilenga projects. Those three production sharing agreements that underlie the projects, we are part of that joint venture team that is running those three projects. That's running those two projects and the three PSAs. So in the participating interest for Tilenga, which are two PSAs, and Kingfisher, we hold 15% participating interest as a commercial player in those two developments, Kingfisher and Tilenga. In the midstream, we have the East African crude oil pipeline, which, as Ali has very well explained, deals with the transportation of crude oil to the international market. It is organized as a limited liability company, and we hold 15% equity in the company that owns the pipeline and is therefore constructing the pipeline right now. The next midstream project is the refinery, which is under development. I will give you probably more details at some point. But we intend to hold 40% equity in the refinery. It will be organized equally as the pipeline as a limited liability company, and so we shall hold 40% of the equity in the refinery. We have a few other projects in the downstream. We have a storage terminal in PG that we are building with a capacity of about 320 million liters of petroleum products storage capacity. That is under us and it's under development. We should be able to have it to ensure that our security of supply as a country improves in terms of the products that we'll have in the market at any given time, should there be supply shocks in the world. We have one facility in Jinja that is operational in the downstream area that is 30 million liters capacity storage. It is under us and we are managing it, and it is operational, and it is bringing us some revenue, sizable revenues for our company. The last one is the Kabarega Industrial Park in Hoima. That's a very exciting project that we are managing, and it's supposed to support us in industrialization as a country, focusing on the synergies between oil and gas and general industry. And so how can oil and gas support industrialization? And so that Kabarega Industrial Park is under us, and we are developing it to ensure that each barrel that we produce is really, the value from it is maximized, and to ensure that we create supply chain skills and import substitution through that industrial park. In essence, that is the list of projects we are dealing with. And as Ali spoke earlier, we will market the crude oil of the country that will be produced. So we have a plan to ensure that by the time production starts in 2025, we are ready to market the first barrels that come out that belong to the government of Uganda or belong to the government or belong to Eacop. So that is the other element that you could also call a project. So many things there, but in brief, that is what Uganda National Oil Company is and what it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Maybe we can go back to you, Ali. I think that's a very clear brief on what the Uganda National Company does. And what is clear from what you both told us is the breadth and depth of the projects that are currently being undertaken. And so the question would be, how are local companies faring in this new business, in this new sector? Ali, as the regulator, could you just give us an update on how Ugandan businesses are doing in this field? Because from what we've heard from you and Peter, there is a huge swath of opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Ellison. And thank you, Peter, for that. Maybe what Peter has not hinted on is that Eacop is one of the beneficiaries now of the last licensing round. As government, we gave them a license in an area called Kasurubani to also start exploring. For the information of our colleagues, the Albertine Graben, the licenses and the oil that has been discovered covers slightly around 40% of it. The other 60% is unlicensed. So government is still running adverts for people who participate in exploration. The last round, Eacop and another Australian company called DGR were the successful applicants. And right now, Eacop, we regulate it as at arm's length, just like any other company, like Total or Talo, in respect to this exploration activity. If I go back to the question of the Ugandans, the regime we have right now, and I gave the law and I invite the lawyers to look at the law because it is your operational Bible for any business. It is the national content law and the petroleum upstream and midstream law, but mostly they are national content regulations. The major principle we have is that procurement of goods and service, the priority should be given to Ugandans. It's a multi-layer structure. And therefore, we require that for goods and services, primary responsibility or primary opportunity is given to Ugandans or Ugandan companies. If they are not there, we then go for joint ventures between Ugandans and non-Ugandans. And that joint venture should have a 52-48 rule, 52 in favor of Ugandans. And then should that not be completely possible, because we acknowledge that this industry is coming here for the first time. You cannot expect that a rig can be manufactured in Uganda. Then we go international. So from what Peter said, so far, we have approved close to $7 billion for contracts since February 2022, when FID was done, $7 billion in terms of contracting, and close to 25% of those contracts are for Ugandan companies. Some of them are here, they are Uganda, the lawyers and so on, or they are representatives of companies that have gotten some of those contracts. You can say 25 is maybe a small margin. Our target is that by 2025, we should be within 40%. But experience from all new producers as a new country, even reaching 20 is always a miracle. Because I can imagine if you want an item like an iPhone 14, it's the one that you need to plan. How much can you do on an iPhone 14? So the core of the other expense are on those what you call long lead items. But in terms of services that have been gazetted for Ugandans, the 16, we have successfully managed to have them remain with Ugandans. We have had opportunity on employment. I think as of last week, we had over 11,000 direct employees on the project. In respect to the contractors, licensees, contractors, and subcontractors. And that number is accumulated from February 2022 up to where we are. we expect it to go up to around 16,000 people. 16,000, between 16 and 18,000. Now, those 11,000 now who are there employed, close to 95% of them are Ugandans at different levels, skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled. Across the whole chain, they are around 95%. For those where we do not have capacity, we have ensured that there is technological transfer, and we insist on it in the joint venture agreements. So if any client comes to you and he wants to do a JV, these are the things you should look out for. Make sure that there is participation of Ugandan genuine. Do not do briefcase, don't do side agreement. It should be genuine, because this is for you. Our job is, the structure has been done to make sure that value is retained in the country. The second is that where we see that we do not have capacity, you must insist on a clause on skills transfer or technological transfer and so on, so that there is transfer of knowledge and technology to the Ugandan during the time of that JV. The idea is that after some time, then the Ugandans should be able to do that. And then enterprise development of companies, SMEs, from small companies to bigger companies. And again, here, this is where I call on our members that do not really necessarily focus on legal per se. You can also be shareholders, or you can also create these small companies or JVs that can actually do the work. So there are specific programs that relate to that in respect to the areas that have been gazetted. And those areas include security, food, hotel accommodation, human resource, fuel, land surveying, clearing and forwarding, crane hire, civil works, environmental studies, communication, waste management. Those have been specifically gazetted. So Elson, if I should say right now, one is that we have what we call first tier companies. Some of them appear on the list of 500 Fortune companies. They are operating here. Whether you're a lawyer or an advisor working with such a company, I think raises your profile in a certain way or another. And then the first tier companies are actually now subcontracting or required to subcontract most of these works to the lower entities. And that covers both Tilenga, Kingfisher, and the Eacop. And we have made sure that any clearances we have given include conditions for subcontracting to Ugandans. I think, Ellison, that's the broader perspective in respect to national content. So far that I can cover in these few minutes. Thank you.
Maybe, Ali, if we stick with you, could you just run us through, because I think it's in the same breath, could you just run us through the opportunities that are actually available for lawyers and other businesses that are interested in this sector? I know you've given us a good overview of the legal regime and assessment of how our companies are doing, but if you could just also try and speak to the opportunities that are available to people who are on this call. If you could also unmute.
First of all, from the point of opportunity, one is that this is what we call a clarion call. For us who are Muslims, it is called Okwazina. You wake up at 6 a.m. and call people to prayer. Some people will go back and sleep, others will wake up and pray. So what we are doing right now, nationally, is what we call a clarion call. Why? The FID that was done in February was for 15 billion US dollars, 10 to 15 billion US dollars. For Eacop, Kingfisher, and Tilenga. That 15 billion US dollars is for the construction phase. It's called the development phase, but it is basically construction of the facilities that will start production. Because before we were in exploration, we discovered, we are now in the development phase, and development phase is actually what you call construction. So what are the opportunities? The first opportunity is that in the next 3 to 4 years, this 10 to 15 billion US dollars is going to be sunk in the wells down, in the machines, in the central processing facilities, in pipeline, and you will not be able to see it. So the first opportunity is that to alert you that in 3 or 4 years, this opportunity will be gone and gone forever. Why? Because once we say the project has reached first oil and you have permission, this money has already been used. Compare it like you're building Serena. So if you do not participate at the point when Serena was being constructed, the only way you will benefit from Serena is after for going there to have lunch, dinner, and so on. But the actual structure is already done. What am I saying? In the next, between now and 2025, there are a lot of works being contracted and subcontracted. Most of these works and services are being advertised on our website, on UNOC website, Total, Sinop, Eacop, but also in public media. The first is for you to not think that this is work for an external person or anyone specialized. You can actually supply that if you go in and understand what are the requirements, look for partners, look for business colleagues, and so on, locally and international, and participate in that. The second is that there is a list of the items I've read here. This list for services are exclusively for Ugandans, and therefore you are free to find a way of participating in those activities, again, as a Ugandan. I always say this. Why? Because the project is for Ugandans, not necessarily legal practitioners. Why do people who studied arts, Bachelor of Arts, or medicine, or pharmacy, or do the business, and you, the lawyers, you cannot do? So that's the first line. Now, the second, for lawyers, I think there are opportunities, okay? First, because this work requires a lot of due diligence, it requires joint ventures, it requires mergers, it requires financing. It is a project that is huge, because when you are talking about money, people need to manage their risks, and therefore specialization in tax. There is a lot of work on immigration law. Why? Because all the foreign companies that come in require a work permit, require resident permits, and so on, but they also have to follow our laws, because our laws require that if you are going to get a work permit, you must demonstrate that there was no qualified Ugandan. So procurement, dispute resolution, financing, this is construction. So by all means, you will have construction issues, either advisory and insurance. These are areas for legal practitioners, both at level 1, which is first of all at licensee, 2 at contractors, and 3 at the number of subcontractors. But for you to take advantage of those, first of all, you must know the basic fundamentals. I should not meet a lawyer on what we call sauna talk saying oil is being taken at night. That's very unserious talk. Like, you should be able to have the minimum information available for you to engage your clients. Why? Because our clients know about this industry more than us. They have been doing this business for the last 50 or so years. We belong, Uganda, Ghana, Guyana, we belong on what in the world of oil they call new producers. We are in the new producers club. The people who are coming here are people who have been producing or advising for the last 50 years. So they should at least find us when we know where Bulisa is, Hoima is, how far is the project, and so on. And two, you know the local laws that relate to this, you know the structure, and so on. So if I am to say, I think those are the areas for me I cannot, from a professional point of view, and maybe Peter can add on where I have missed something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. I think that in helping to shine the torch on the opportunities that are available and the knowledge, I think that Peter and you have been really at the forefront of bringing light to this industry. This otherwise known as dark industry, you've been helping to power the black product to make sure that it produces light, and you've been at the forefront of it. And Peter, back to you now. I want to know, Peter, about the actual projects again. If we go back, I think we've heard a lot about the opportunities from Ali, but if we go back to the projects, and there are two particular projects I want you to speak to. You had told that to us in your introduction, which we hardly hear about, and which I don't think we have enough knowledge of. One is the industrial, what you call the Kabalega Industrial Park. And the second one is the Uganda refinery. We read in the paper and the refinery contract had collapsed. So maybe you could come and explain that to us. But before you do, if you're just joining us, we are on our webinar organized by the Natural Resources Cluster of the Uganda Law Society, and I am privileged and honored. My name is Ellison Karhanga, and I am privileged and honored to be hosting Mr. Ali Sekatawa, the Director of Legal and Regulatory Affairs of the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, and Mr. Peter Mulisa, the Chief Legal and Corporate Affairs Officer of the Uganda National Company and Company Secretary. So Peter, if you can tell us about the project we hardly hear about, which is the industrial park, what has that got to do with oil and why is it useful, and the Uganda refinery, where it is and how it's going. We will also be opening up questions to those in our audience very soon indeed. If you have questions though, which are burning to have answered, please type them in the Q&A. Over to you, Peter. Why is the refinery important? What's happening with it? And what's the story with this industrial park? Why isn't it with the guys we usually see opening industrial parks?
Thank you, Edison, and good afternoon, colleagues, again. Maybe before I delve into it, just to add on Ali's clarion call, that we have these big projects here. Eacop is $4 billion. The upstream segment, the two projects that Ali has spoken about, and I did as well, about $8 billion. So that's 12 from 3 projects. The refinery will add about 4 billion. That's 16. That's real investment in money terms. And it's going to happen. We've started with the 3. The refinery is coming along. And that will happen in a space of no more than 7 years for all that money to be invested in this country. So as much as we can tap, we should. And I think the society is lucky to have so many of its members involved in this project, both at a regulatory level, commercial, and policy. So we should take advantage of this industry and provide all the services, even goods, that the industry requires, as Ali has stated. So I think this cannot be overstated. And I'd like to challenge all you colleagues to find a way to participate, whether it's helping in land acquisition or some advisory form, on just find a way to participate so that all this money that is being spent does not leave our country, but we retain as much as we can. That's a target we have on this side. That is our commitment to support everybody to ensure that as many as is possible participate in this sector. Now going to the questions, the question you gave me, Ellison. Why do we need a refinery and what is this refinery? So yes, in terms of crude oil production, we will be producing about 230,000 to 240,000 barrels of crude oil per day. Now, our plan as the state, and which is now commercialized and in the laws and in agreements, is that The crude oil pipeline will transport part of this crude oil, but 60,000 barrels of the produced crude will stay in this country to be refined through a refinery that we are developing and that will sit in Hoima, just near the what we call pump station 1, the gathering point for all the crude produced in the northern fields and the southern fields. 60,000 barrels will be removed and put into this refinery and refined, while the rest will be exported to the international market. Why do we need a refinery? One, I must say our economic assessment of the refinery as a project is that it is profitable. It has a rate of return that is upwards of 20%. So it's a very good business in itself as a commercial venture for anybody playing in this venture, including government that will hold 40% through Eacop. So that's the first justification. The second justification is that there are many products that we use in this country that are imported. And the principal ones that we all have to deal with on a daily basis are petroleum products like petrol, diesel, and maybe jet fuel and kerosene. Now, instead of importing these, and we spend a sizable amount of money on them each year, about $1.4 billion a year in importing these products, we should be able to produce them here, and we will be able to produce them here. And so improve our balance of payment in terms of, instead of spending this money abroad, we spend it on products that are produced here from our own crude oil. So that's the second justification. It is an import substitution element and ensuring that we have better energy security than we would when we rely on imported products. Third, when you refine crude oil, you have certain elements that do not turn into light products. Now, these, the technical teams call them bottom of the barrel products. Now, these can be converted into other products through a manufacturing phase in the petrochemical industries and other related industries, and give us products that we need, but import today. And so we'll be able to have all the elements of some of the many products, about 6,000 products that come from petrochemical industries that we use in our daily lives, produced here. And what that will do is that it will improve our balance of trade, our balance of payment, to create supply chains. And that's the justification for the Kabarega Industrial Park. So what will Kabarega Industrial Park do? So when we have the crude oil refined in the petroleum, in the refinery that we are going to construct, the 60,000 barrels per day refinery, the bottom of the barrel products will go into the petrochemical industries that will sit in this industrial park. And then the petrochemical industries will produce all these products that we import. And as such, we are able to create more value within the country. So the Kabarega Industrial Park is intended, it's a 29 square kilometer piece of land that has been acquired, and within which will sit the refinery on 5 square miles. We have an airport that is near completion, should be launched October this year, that sits in that industrial park. And then around the refinery, around this airport, we shall have petrochemical industries, we shall have fertilizer plants that feed off the refinery and produce further products that we need in our markets. We've done a study to see the justification for some of these, this industrial park that we are putting in place, to see the value it would create for this country if when properly implemented as we plan to implement it. And the key statistics I can pick is that it will add about US dollars 5.9 billion per annum on the national GDP growth. That's number one, when we implement it fully. And we think by 2035, it should be nearly fully implemented, and we'll have these industries churning out products that we import. And once you have this $4.9 billion added by just this project that is connected to oil and gas, $4.9 billion on our GDP, that is a significant contribution on the growth of this country. And by that growth, of course, you're creating employment, you're improving our tax to GDP ratio, you're improving our tax base, and that's what we are trying to achieve. In terms of national capital formation, Our macroeconomic study shows that we'll be able to add about $11.9 billion on our national capital formation. And that's how countries grow. Countries are like homes. You grow by producing more than you consume, and then you start building the surplus. In terms of our balance of payments, because we believe that instead of importing these products that we're importing today, that oil generated that come from the petrochemical industries, when we produce them here, we will be able to improve our balance of payment. And our analysis indicates that we'll improve it by about $849 million per year. In terms of fiscal impact, you're looking at about $1.2 billion per annum. So in terms of significance and importance and justification of the project, the Kabarega Industrial Park, together with the refinery, are extremely important in creating significant value, additional value out of our crude oil, but also to improve our security of supply and supply our market here with the products that we currently import. In addition, there are other products that we would be looking at, like fertilizers, and of course, from petrochemicals, you look at things like plastics, elements of packaging, medical elements, things that do plastics, like gloves that you use in hospitals. All these products, several, many products that will come out of the industrial park. So our plan is not just to buy the barrels, ship them, and then go out to import products. No, our plan is to ensure that part of the crude oil that is produced is exported through the pipeline, but we add value to a segment of it that satisfies our market and our neighboring markets. So that's how we came to the point of having a refinery and the industrial park. In terms of where the refinery is at, because the refinery is definitely dependent on crude oil that's produced upstream, it is a little behind the upstream projects, which is the best way to structure the projects, that as the upstream gets ready, the refinery is slightly behind it. So that way you're able to manage financing of both projects. So the refinery, in terms of preparation, we finished the front-end engineering and design, which basically tells us the type of refinery we shall have, the kind of technology we shall use, and the kind of products it shall produce for the market. So then we're able to study whether the market can consume this or it cannot, and if it cannot, what we need to do, the value addition that we need to do. So that the front-end engineering and design has been completed. We've submitted it to the government, and Ali, my colleague here, the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, has approved it. So we have that on hand. The engineering design is in place, front-end engineering and design. Of course, we are environmentally sensitive and we work in a very highly regulated environmental space. So we've done environmental social impact assessment for the refinery. It's absolutely complete now. And we're in the process of handing it over to NEMA to review, do public hearings, and we run through the elements of discussing with the whole country about what we see as our mitigation measures in this in execution of this project. And once that is done, we have a certificate. We should be able then to take final investment decision for the refinery, hopefully sometime in the second quarter next year, and then implement this project. The Kabarega Industrial Park is being opened. The airport is done. We are working on roads within the park to open it. And very soon we'll have a joint venture partner joining us to ensure that we develop it and start hosting industries in the park. I think, Edison, that should help in explaining where we are at on these two projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think we're all inspired really by the project and where we stand at the moment. And so I want to ask this next question I'll just ask two questions to both of you. The last one will be about the environment, but the first one, if we go back to that issue of national content, I think there's a question here about the bargaining power between a small Ugandan business, for example, on the one hand, and Total Energies on the other, that all the bargaining power is in favor of the multinational. How can UNOC and Power help small businesses get fair terms. So Ali, this is not so much about, this is about the contracts themselves. Can the contracting terms be made fairer for those of us who don't have the amount of power that the multinationals have?
Okay, thank you for that good question. I think that capacity has been acknowledged by government, and we have taken certain initiatives, but we also request that we are in a liberal economy. We also expect that the companies also take certain initiatives. For example, we've partnered with Stanbic Bank for the last 3-4 years to do a job on capacity building. And that capacity building, selected companies, private companies are taken there and taken through a contracting and procurement process, the standards that are required, the laws, the economics, the project, so that that entity has a certain level of weight behind it when it enters the negotiation room. The second is that government now is financing what is called an industrial enhancement center, which we have approved, and it's going to be set up. And the primary focus of it is exactly that question, to make sure that the local companies are given enhanced in terms of their capacity to negotiate, to bid, to contract, but also to execute. The third is that we are now doing, we've done a policy, it's not yet in place, but a national content fund. And the purpose of that fund, again, is to give that capacity. And then we run what are called quarterly stakeholder meetings to give capacity. But that is where a certain level we have to stop. You know, there's this thing of Twagala government, Etuyambe. The thing is that this is business. Now, you also have to say, if I should advise, that the Ugandan company should hire lawyers like the ones who are here that I see, who are well schooled in this area, so that when they enter into the negotiation rooms, they could be able to support. And then lastly, from a regulatory perspective, we ensure fairness, because the law gives the mandate to us to ensure that there is fairness in the sector, and we stand between like the IOCs and the companies, and we actually approve the contracts. And where we see that there are terms which are not very okay, we have a conversation. But lastly is the culture of the clients we have. What we have seen over time is that actually these companies do not want to do the work themselves. They do not necessarily want to take advantage of Ugandans. It is the standard way of how they are operating all over the world. It is the obligation for us to come to the level of international level. Some of these companies are very reputable companies, like Total. They operate in over 40 countries. They are regulated on the stock exchange. And so the issue of saying is trying to cut corners and so on might not arise at the level of that reputational level. The issue is that you have to know that this is the minimum requirement, either in terms of quality, standard, and so on, and see how we can come up. I think these are the things for me. I see it's a journey. As I said, we are starting now development. Oil is going to be with us for the next 20 to 30 years. Based on other producers, if I go to Mozambique, and I go to Angola, and I go to Tanzania, I think we are fairly way above, ahead of any of the new, even Guyana. Guyana, I should tell you, some of their people have been here. They are here to look to benchmark how we have prepared, because based on that 25%, in some of those countries they actually do not have. So I think we should first of all celebrate where we are, see how we can move forward together, invest in ourselves, including the lawyers, invest in studying, invest in reading, invest in these conferences, and make sure that we understand the project, invest in professional advice, and so on, and then we can all move together. Chair, I think that's what I can state on that point. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Peter, if you could take us to the same, I know if there's anything more you wish to add on that point, the issue of bargaining power between our businesses and the multinationals, and how UNOC can help us.
He has really done well in answering that question, but the law gives us the starting point. The law gives preference to Ugandan companies. The regulations are in place to push us. So in terms of bargaining power, you start with the law. The law has given you preference as a Ugandan company, as a Ugandan entity. That's a big push in our bargaining. These companies are working in Uganda, regulated by Ugandan companies. So of course, if it is a procurement, if it is a process, it will have to follow Ugandan laws. If it is an employment contract, we'll have to follow Ugandan laws. And that allows us to use the framework of regulation that we are used to. Now, there is a reality that we must also at some point acknowledge. So if I am a small business and I'm competing with bigger entities, how do I enhance my presentation? Even before I get into the room to negotiate, I should be able to look at harnessing other people's capabilities through joint venture agreements or joint venturing that Alice spoke about. So that when you approach a contract, you actually present a case of capability to execute that contract. And I don't think that is only limited to firms supplying, to entities supplying catering services or logistics or other kinds of services. Even law firms, we can pull together our resources. So when we get into that room to negotiate that contract, we actually have passed the threshold of, can you do the job? I have presented myself with the capability through joint venturing to execute the job. Now, once you get into the room and you have exhibited that you have the capacity through either your own self or through joint venturing to execute the job, the law says even on pricing, a Ugandan company will have preference. Even if your pricing, your cost of service is slightly higher than a non-Ugandan, you still have an advantage to taking the project. So I think the law has helped us. A lot that remains is us taking advantage of what we have before us. And as I have said before, I believe my colleague Ali has said, there is a significant value in trying to put together our resources and bid together. I think it's better for 3 law firms to win a contract of $6 million than 1 law firm win a contract of 500,000. Because in building a capacity together, you can actually go for the bigger contract than each entity go for a smaller one and probably even fail to get it. So that is, I think, the only basic thing that I can add. Of course, we can't overemphasize the need to study and understand this industry. It's like any other industry. It's like land law, it's like litigation. You can study it, its laws, its policies, its regulations. You can study it and you can practice it. So I would encourage our colleagues and the Law Society to encourage our people and to create avenues of training to ensure that we are able to participate in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Peter, I'll go back to you and I'll ask the same question to Ali. Please, if you're joining us, we are the Natural Resources Cluster of the Uganda Law Society has put together this conversation. It's a conversation between myself, Mr. Ali Sekatawa from the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, and Mr. Peter Mulisa from the Uganda National Oil Company. And we are discussing the latest and best that's happening in the oil sector in Uganda. As you know, Uganda is on the verge of producing oil, and there are these incredible opportunities that we've gone through for local companies. There's a great state in which the project is. But gentlemen, There is a question which we had prepared and which I have also seen someone asking, and this is a question about the environment. And the question which I have seen is about, someone has said, someone called Daniel Linda has asked, emissions specifically from fossils have been a major driver of global warming and other related threats to not only our environment, but the climate at large. As the country starts excavating fossils, we expect larger fossil utilities within the country. Has the country put any regulations or directives to govern or combat these more expected emissions? And apart from the question about emissions, generally, that question will go out to biodiversity, to the social aspects. What have we done to protect our environment, our communities, our lakes, our rivers from an industry that is being accused of being a pollutant? And I think that is the question which I think is being asked. So if you could just take up 5 minutes each for that, what we're doing to what safeguards, and we'll start with you, Peter, and then we'll go to Ali. What safeguards we have put in place for the environment?
Thank you, Edison. And it's a very good question. So there are two elements there, that projects happen in our environment. And so we must protect the environment in which the projects happen. But also the projects interact with people. So you must manage the social elements of the impacts from the projects. But of course, there is a carbon footprint from both the projects, from the people, from all elements connected to the project. So how are we managing those three elements? The carbon footprint, relating with biodiversity, and then the social. In Uganda, let me start with Uganda. Our regime as a country on the environmental element requires that projects of this nature, oil and gas, and they have all really complied, must have an environmental impact social assessment. Environmental social impact assessment, pardon me. Now, what is involved in this ESIA statement that is usually thrown around is that you look at the project, where it's going to sit, the areas that is going to interact with, what is required to execute that project, like when you start drilling, moving of drills, drilling the rigs and moving of people, and you look at the environment and see the impacts that will be occasioned on the environment. Now, once you identify those impacts, you classify them into high, medium, and low. And then you aim to avoid where there is high impact, completely avoid. That would many times require maybe change of location of the project or change of design of the project. And then eventually those that you can't avoid, that medium or low, you work at mitigation measures that will ensure that the impacts are significantly minimized or altogether removed. And then once those are in place, you have an impact assessment that is studied by the community, by the local leadership, by academia, and generally by the whole country. And it is open and everybody does provide their questions and comments, and all these are dealt with. And once everybody has contributed, including the community, then that is put to NEMA, and NEMA reviews. And if the mitigations are strong enough, then NEMA approves and gives a certificate. So each of our projects, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, the Tirenga project, Kingfisher, the refinery, have all gone through that process. And I sat in some of the meetings where the mitigations were being discussed with the community. And in two of them, the attendance was 5,000 and 6,000 people, the community attending and giving their thoughts on the mitigations that in this project. The second element would be social. How do you deal with the people who are impacted by the project, either because the project is near them or the project might require displacement or taking of part of their land? And what we've driven really as our key objective has been to ensure that the project leaves people better than it found them. And that has guided us in all our social and resettlement exercises. And of course, we have legal provisions here, but also have international standards, IFC standards and other standards that we have adopted to ensure that the projects have as minimal impact as possible. When you look at the design, and I'll give you just a few examples, the design of the upstream assets, the producing assets, we have silent working rigs. And I think Ali wrote an article this week or last week about the rigs. And those rigs are silent because you have deployed a few rigs within the national park. So you don't want noise to disturb the animals. It costs more to have the silent rig than a non-silent rig, but we have absorbed that cost because it is the best way to mitigate the impact that project would have on the animals or the environment. And that is applicable to all the rigs that we have in Kingfisher and in Telenga. For the pipeline, we've, as much as possible in selecting the route, and we had to change the routing a few times in some areas, ensured that the route does not cross rivers, or as much as possible, you minimize the number of rivers to cross swamps, forests. And because of that, we've ended up crossing only 2 rivers. And in crossing those rivers, we are going to use what we call horizontal directional drilling to ensure that the pipeline has no contact with the riverbed. It just goes under and exits on the other side. And there are block valves on both ends. So we've done all these things to ensure that the impacts are mitigated or altogether removed. And I'll just give you another example. I'm sure all of you have seen what we call nodding donkeys in producing crude oil. In Uganda, we are using submersible pumps, electric pumps. So you won't have those nodding donkeys. And the idea is basically to reduce the impact. And in terms of managing the carbon footprint for the pipeline, for instance, we have, instead of powering or giving electricity to the pipeline through burning of crude oil, we have 5 solar farms that that are part of the project cost, $120 million, that are going to power 80% of the pipeline and above the ground facilities. The other 20% will come from the grid in Uganda and partly in Tanzania. The grid in Uganda is green, really, it's largely hydro. So it's very much a green grid. So in essence, your carbon footprint there is reduced by the kind of heating energy you're using to heat the pipeline. And all these efforts, plus others that I can't mention on this webinar because there are many, have given our projects the lowest carbon footprint that you can speak of today in the world with the technology that is available. That is 13.3 kilograms of carbon dioxide per barrel. And that is the lowest you can speak about. There's a country that claims 13 kilograms, but yes, the world average is 33 kilograms of carbon dioxide per barrel. So we are doing exceedingly well. We also have a decommissioning fund as an obligation on the licensees. As we start producing oil, we put some money in a fund that will be used to decommission the assets. Now, if you Google decommissioning, you'll find that there are significant challenges of decommissioning assets in some other parts of the world, North Sea and others. But here we have a regime that makes sure that if production ends, that asset will be removed, that ground will be restored to what it was before it was disturbed. And if you go there after decommissioning, you'll not be able to know that there was any disturbance on that land. And we have some areas that we have restored through a decommissioning plan that had exploration activity. If you go there today, you would not be able to know. We have to identify it and show it to you. And so that is, it's a very big topic, but in brief, that's what we are talking about. On the UNOC side, as a project, in addition to all these elements that reduce our impact on environment and biodiversity, we have a plan to plant 40 million trees. The target, really the objective, is to ensure that we are carbon neutral in all our projects. And that is our plan. We have an ESG team, we have an ESG plan and framework and policy to ensure that all our projects today and in the future are as much as possible carbon neutral. Edison, I hope I've not taken more than 5 minutes, but I hope I've answered the question. Thank you.
I think you've answered the question extremely comprehensively. And so Ali will then take very few minutes to really build up on what you said.
Thank you, Peter. One is, I wanted to go on the international. The first thing from a structured perspective, maybe to add on what Peter has said, is that in the global gas emissions, Africa contributes less than 3%. The 97% of this climate issue comes from the developed world. And that you should never lose focus of it in the whole of this discussion. Now, then you come home in Uganda and say, what are the causes in Uganda of environmental degradation? And those studies are there. And the major causes in Uganda here is land use, which is deforestation and agriculture. It's not fossil fuels. That's the first point we all need to know. There is climate crisis, yes, but what are the causes? Because this is science, it is not algebra guessing, no. So 97% of it is from the global north. So what then does it mean? The second is, if you're talking about the energy transition, what is the transition? The energy transition, again, science shows that you need energy to transition. And that transition can take averagely 30 years or to 40 for you to transition to what we call clean energy. So the question again, as a Ugandan, you need to ask is that if 97% is being caused by the global north, and we only Africa, the whole of it is 3%, then how can I stop? Because all their arguments is that leave your crude under because you are going to blow this environment. So the question is that then Uganda right now is a net importer of petroleum products. And our import bill, Uganda as of now, exceeds 2 billion per year. So the question is that if there's this energy transition and you're a net importer and you're paying 2 billion per year, but you have crude in Hoima, do you leave it there and continue importing this crude from the polluter who has been polluting from industrial? That's the ideological. I like the philosophical alignment. Once we are aligned on that, that's first. Then it settles the debate that we must produce our crude. That debate is non-negotiable. Red line, we must produce. Then the next is, how do we produce sustainably? And I think Peter has done justice to that part. What I need to add is that in 2016, the environmental laws and policy were all revamped. Most of the things Peter talked about were not there. So we have a brand new set of environmental laws, and I can highlight some of the requirements there. There is no flaring and gas venting. That's to protect the environment. Okay? There are emission limits in those laws. And then greenhouse gas emissions are calculated for every project as part of the SI, as Peter has said. What strategy for the project? Again, it is decarbonization. Because why is fossil fuels spoiling the environment? Because of carbon dioxide. What is decarbonization? The project will bring LPG to be produced in Uganda. As you know, we are cutting forests for all of us to have charcoal and firewood at home. I think 70% of us use, or even 80 use charcoal and firewood. The project brings LPG. Two, there is electrification of the oil and gas using power from the national grid. That's hydro, okay? And converting excess gas to power. What are the mitigation measures? Okay? They are, one, the strategy is based on avoidance of sensitive locations, identifying impacts, which has been done, avoidance of sensitive areas, and mitigation impacts, which are highlighted in the SIA. And then lastly, in the design of the whole project, there are certain things that have been input to make sure that there is very minimum environmental impact. The pipeline will be buried underground, 6 feet under, and actually the soil put back. It will be a smart pipeline because it is going to be operated using internet, and there's going to be a real-time monitoring center here in PAU, but also in the field to observe it in real time what is happening. It has been insulated by so many layers to make sure that, and then there are valves put at every distance to ensure that if there is a leak at any one point, it is done. And so many other technical, as Peter said, technical inbuilt mechanism to make sure that it meets the environment. The question we have, maybe Edison, is that we have pipelines that are operating from 1960. If you consider a car, they are like Bedford of the 1960s. Our pipeline is like an iPhone 14 Plus, and it has put in the latest technology. I think the question is, how can people who have 1 million kilometers of pipelines under, built in 1960 or 1950, come and say that this pipeline is the one which is a disaster? So again, to conclude, it is to give assurance that there has been the highest regard to environmental and social concerns. The project has gone through multiple independent audits. Even the hiring of the people to do this work, they were required to be either local and internationally certified people to do SIA and the designers. The companies that have done it are some of the best companies in the world. The project has gone through human rights and environmental independent studies, and it has been found to be compliant. And lastly, before all these SIAs were approved, public hearings were done all over the country. I mean, along the pipeline and so on. And over 10,000 people, I think, per public hearing were appearing, including experts. They gave their views. Those views, I can say, NEMA gave a conditional clearance, but I can say the external people contributed almost half of the conditions that NEMA put because they identified the areas that should be complied with. So there are those items I thought I would add on what Peter has done to emphasize that, one, we must produce. Two, there has been the efforts to make sure that the project is developed in a very sustainable manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. I would agree that our project is like an iPhone with the latest technology. We have a number of questions coming from our audience. For those who are just joining us, we have a few minutes left to go. We have Mr. Peter Mulisa from the Uganda National Oil Company and Mr. Ali Sekatawa from the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. And I am the moderator, Ellison Karuhanga from Kampala Associated Advocates. We are just having a fantastic conversation about the state of where our project is, the project opportunities, and the project risks. And I just want to take you very quickly, gentlemen, through the Q&As. If you have typed questions in the Q&A, I think we've dealt with the first one. There is someone called Blair Mugume, and I'll mix his question with someone called Nikron Zavi. And they're asking Mr. Sekatawa, what strategies are planned for the M&E of the knowledge and skills transfer to Uganda? A similar policy applies for the Tilenga project, particularly the drilling contractor. But if you look at the local content onboarded, it's limited to a few roles, pretty understandable in the early phases. But even still, there's a number of challenges involved regarding language barrier between the Chinese and Ugandans. How will the impact of this policy be tracked? I think it's a very complicated question, Blair, but I think what you're trying to ask is what strategies do we have for the transfer of skills and knowledge to Ugandans? Javi Nikron, or Zavi Nikron, is asking, is Wekesa Mike actually, Nike from West Nile, and he's a student. No, sorry, he's Wekesa Nike, a fourth-year petroleum student of Management at Mbarara University. And he has seen an ongoing Eacop MOOC, I don't know what that is, which specifically targeted Tanzanians. Where do we stand for Ugandans if the pipeline passes through here? So I think maybe Ali, if you could take those two questions very briefly.
Okay. Blair, thank you for that question. M&E for transfer of knowledge. As I indicated earlier, we require primarily that something is done by Blair. But if Blair is not possible, a JV. When you do a JV at a company level, we require clear provisions on transfer of knowledge. That means that you come and say, someone from maybe Greece can only do this work or this machinery, then we require. And I think what Blair is asking is, how do we monitor and evaluate that aspect? The first gate is at the approval of the contract. So when we approve the contract or the JV, we make sure that there is that clause. The second is that at all execution points, we have our monitors. PAU monitors are on the ground and they make sure that they monitor the things that you can see and so on, and who is doing them. 3, the law requires daily reporting, weekly reporting, and so on. And again, getting through those reports, you can be able to pick out. And then lastly, now it comes to maybe the approval of the second contract. Let me say, if you came and said, I'm going to partner with Edison and I'm going to transfer this knowledge to Edison, and we have seen it where someone comes with a machine, and then at renewal, we tell him that, look, I think Edison can now operate this machine. So either sell it to him or lease it to him, but we do not expect to approve another joint venture at renewal. However, as I said, this is work in motion. If you have any ideas or information on the ground on how that can be improved, I think you are very welcome, because as I said, we started intensive activity in February 2022. We want to be in Tanga commissioning in a tent in 2025. And technology transfer is one of the items, but the project has to move according to schedule. So if you have something, please. The second question, I think, was not very clear, the one from Mbarara University. I can only say generally that the project is Eacop is being developed as a single integrated project. We are looking at it as one pipeline. That's why in the IGA, we agreed to harmonize all laws, principles, and so on. So it's possible that what you call the announcement for Tanzania is for actually the actual project, because we've seen some of the scope where it is covering both, and all it requires is a joint venture, a Ugandan and a Tanzanian, and then working together. And actually, it is something that we encourage, that Ugandans go and look for Tanzanian brothers, and Tanzanians look for Ugandans to take advantage. Why? The oil is coming from Uganda. The pipeline is a Ugandan project at conceptual design, but actually, the pipeline is 1,443 kilometers. Uganda only has 299. The bigger part of this pipeline is in Tanzania, and therefore there is a lot of work that is going to be done in Tanzania. So if you think regionally in terms of opportunity, it is to have a Tanzanian brother or sister, and you, as the Waganda call it, you kutaiza from both sides. You go the other side and this side and do a JV. Because some of these adverts actually require that you have a presence the other side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ali. I think, Peter, there's a question for you from Geoffrey. I believe it is Geoffrey Nyasimi, who says, please talk about the opportunity available in the operation and maintenance project available at the UNOC's existing storage capacity. How much storage capacity does UNOC have?
Listen, I've tried to answer some of the questions online, and that is one of the questions I had answered. So in terms of storage capacity, we have 30 million liters capacity in Ginger, in an existing storage terminal. We manage it by ourselves. So, but there are, of course, other services like insurance and the like. But in terms of operation and maintenance, operations, we manage. Of course, we get support on maintenance and different things. And we do advertise all these services. So when we advertise and we have the capacity and the skill, please do put in. Then there was a question, I picked a few questions, Edison, if I can pick them. Information on the 40 million trees Eacop campaign. I spoke about this. We are starting on this project to plant 40 million trees, and we'll continue planting trees to just ensure that we offset any carbon emissions that come from our projects. In terms of partnerships, we are working with churches, we are working with religious entities, we are working with traditional entities, we are working with all partners that have land or have knowledge in forest maintenance. And so if you are in that, in any of those categories, you definitely can come and partner with us. Somebody asked, why isn't Shell working on Eacop? I absolutely don't know. But in terms of ownership, Eacop is owned by UNOC, TPDC, CNOOC, Total. We advertised for services, and every entity that was capable of providing services put in, and now we have contractors that are lined up. So it's possible that we have not had a chance to interface or interact with the Shell, but it definitely has other assets. But today we don't have Shell in the entity. And then there was another question on AGRC and when is the FID for KIP. KIP, we are taking forward the project on our own as UNOC, and we'll get a joint venture partner, but we'll develop it in phases. And as such, you'll probably not have a certain point where you will have FID, but we'll have different milestones that come at different points. And as we continuously communicate, you'll be able to get communication in these milestones as they are achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. There's another question here. I think both of you can answer it. It's a question. I'll start with you, Peter. It's a question from Julius Barigawa. And he says that he has seen a new study that shows that Eacop will cross 158 swamps in Uganda alone and impact the wildlife and aquatic life in those wetlands. Plus, during construction, the technology used to cross those 158 wetlands in swamps is open instead of directional drilling. Did the Eacop environment and social impact assessment overlook these risks to so many wetlands? I don't know if it's the same study, but anyway, first answer before
Many studies, and I believe we'll continue to have many studies. But as colleagues, lawyers, I know we can consume information and digest it very easily. It's probably the uniqueness of our profession. So the environmental social impact assessment reports are on the websites of Eacop, websites of UNOC, the website of PAU. Even the third-party evaluation of these elements has been published. So just go read and you'll understand what we are talking about. We have published the route of Eacop in relation to biodiversity sensitive spots, including all the sensitive spots that you could talk about. And we have clearly indicated and explained to the world using this route map, the map of this route, that we have avoided all the sensitive areas, and all Ramsar sites have been avoided, completely avoided. Now, in terms of numbers, we will have 2 river crossings, only 2 river crossings. And for those based on the ESIA that is approved, based on the FEED, front-end engineering and design, and the engineering plan for the pipeline, we shall use horizontal drilling to go below the riverbed and exit on the other side. So the pipeline will not have contact with the rivers. 2 rivers. We have 5 swamps that we will cross. Not 1,000 swamps or 100, I don't know the new number now, that we will cross, and all of them, they meet the environmental social impact assessment that we have has been approved. So the technology that will be used is such that we shall not have impacts on these swamps. I read that
I think we've lost Peter. Maybe Ali, if you could just fill in as we are getting back, Peter.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen this report.
Doing well. The only thing I need to say is who authored this report. For your information, the entity that authored this report is a litigant. It filed a case in Uganda, 2 cases. It filed one in East Africa, and it is the one that has been filing and failing the cases in France. The identity of the author of that report is very important on the credibility of the report. And in all the suits they have filed and failed, they have been saying we should leave the crude underground for different reasons. 2, before either these or other people, they are the same people that have taken a map, international fora, saying the pipeline passes through Lake Victoria. You have all seen the map, it doesn't. And then the last they did, the last ridiculous thing is that it passes through, I think, 236 rivers or 136. 3, they say it emits, the carbon gases it emits are more than, I think, Australia and America and all of them combined. So this latest one on the swamps should be seen in that context. As advocates, you can only pray the opportunity you have the expert in inverted comma who issued that report before you for cross-examination. For me, that's the only comment I can make. I cannot really delve into the details of that because we have engaged the same wild allegations before. The only thing maybe I should say as Ugandans is that you should be aware that there are people sitting every day, being financed every day, and organizing, and we find them on planes and so on flying with one objective, that we should never produce this fruit. We call them poverty conservationists from an ideological perspective. And we should be aware of those and see how, in what box we can put them as we handle. And the actual discussion on sustainability and whether the project will meet the ESG requirements and so on, I think that's a live discussion. We all acknowledge climate change and we can all contribute. But when people start making these wild allegations, if, for example, Eacop in Uganda is affecting 177 homes directly, and someone has filed that it is displacing 10,000 homes, and you find him very busy in America in a workshop making that presentation, then what do you do with such a situation? What do we do is to come and share the information, invite you. I have seen someone who has asked, how do we go to the Albertine or the Eacop route and see? I think I should say the procedure is you write to PAU, and I think we are going to work together, Uganda Law Society and this cluster, and arrange that whatever we have said here, you come and see it for yourselves. I think after that, you can then come on another session when you see, because they say, like here, the Waganda, that the eyes are in when you see by yourself. So we invite you, we shall arrange, myself and Peter, and we shall arrange through our cluster, the Natural Resources Cluster of Uganda Law Society, for those who are willing to come. And then you see whether these 230 rivers exist, whether the 300, I don't know how many wetlands exist, whether the project is passing through Lake Victoria, and you look at the restored wells and see what is actually happening for yourselves, so that then we can have a more mature discussion. And probably lastly on that point, Edison, with your permission, since FID, these people have really taken a lot, not real of our time, but for especially the members of the public, including the law society. Because you spend many time arguing about those false reports and missing the actual opportunity before us. What is the actual opportunity before us? Those who were ready in February and participated in the bidding or before February have now signed contracts and they are working. Those who kept arguing with the likes of those ones of wetlands and so on, they are still arguing. The project is going forward. Now, we need to know that today is July 2025, the project will be closing construction. We can choose to keep arguing with these people, or we can choose to say, no, this is time to work. For me, let me go to the Albertine. I see what is happening. Let me apply for a job. Let me do a joint venture and so on. Because the other discussion, in a way, is diversionary in my view, because it has diverted so many people whom you find busy while others are working and taking advantage. I think, Edson, that's the comment I wanted to make. Thank you. Peter is back, I think.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ali. I think Peter. Hello, Peter, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Apologies, I got disconnected for some reason. But on that point, really, I think I had exhausted my submission, and Ali has put it, I think, so well that we need to focus on the activities. To just conclude that remark, I want to say there is no country in the world that has developed as a low energy consumer. None. It's impossible. So there must be a ramp up in the energy consumption, and you must use all your energy sources as sustainably as possible, as we are doing, to be able to develop your nation. So we must aim for one thing, not to try to stop projects, but to work at how to ensure that for the 13.3 kilogram per barrel emissions that of carbon dioxide that we are getting from these projects, very good. It's among the best in the world. Can we have ideas maybe to improve that? That conversation is constructive. But to sit and forge some reports and come here and tell us about 200 rivers that the pipeline is crossing and 100,000, I think we need to ignore that kind of conversation and look at constructive criticism is fine, but we must support the projects that are able to give us work, to give our children work, to give this country some resources and get us out of poverty. Energy and economic poverty.
Thank you very much. There's a question here, Ali, for you. But I think you've answered it. It was someone called, someone was asking about, I think it was Louis was asking about what can be done to visit the oil fields, because it's very difficult, he said. But I think you'd spoken to that. Maybe you could just answer that in a sentence, just as a recap.
No, because it's a construction site, so it's a regulated site. But we arrange regularly through organized structures. Like now, I think Godwin and our president, Mr. Undo, we have agreed that through the cluster, we are going to organize an excursion, and I think they will share the details. And we have committed myself from PAU and Peter from UNO to facilitate this and ensure that you get full access to see, and we shall arrange for you a good team to take you through the whole area so that you can be able to see for yourself and ask further questions on everything we are discussing. Thank you. But also, if you have an individual company, like you have a company, you can still write through an individual company with the details of the people that you want to come and so on. And we can also look at that separately. But for this cluster, through the president, I think we've already agreed that we shall arrange a special excursion working with Uganda Law Society. Thank you.
Yes, and then Peter, the question to you is, what's the strategy to secure funding for the refinery, since someone says something called AGRC was not successful in getting the funding? So how are you going to get the funding?
What we've done is, as I stated earlier, we hold 40% in the project, and we intend to provide equity for that. So that is already planned in our provided for in our budget structure with the Ministry of Finance. So that's about $500 million. It's availed. It's planned for, and as you know, we shall be able to meet our equity obligations. We're also looking at now joint venture partners that will come into a joint venture partner that will come in to cover the next element. But of course, like any other project, we'll engage in financing for the debt, agree on the percentage of the debt and the mechanisms to getting debt. We've succeeded in acquiring debt for the pipeline. We think we should be successful in acquiring debt for the refinery. And there's a lot of interest in state entities and state leaning financing entities to support the refinery. So as we stand today, we are not worried about raising the capex, the capital expenditure required to construct the refinery to the point of operation. So what we can assure you is we have experience, we have good teams around us, we have advisory teams around us. We'll be able to secure both equity and debt for the refinery and get it executed and commissioned.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Peter. I think it is coming to 5. We've been here for almost 1 hour, 45 minutes, exchanging ideas. I'm not sure if there's anything burning from anyone. I would like to give you gentlemen the last word. I first of all want to apologize to many of the questions we haven't been able to get around to, but I think that we've tried our best to answer as many questions as possible and to have the session be as interactive as possible. But if there are any problems in its execution, I take full responsibility. But for now, allow me to ask you, gentlemen, if you have any closing remarks. I will start with Ali and I'll close with Peter. If you could just give us your closing argument.
For me, thank you, Ellison, and thank you, colleagues who have attended this informative webinar. I don't think it should actually be an argument. The time for argument is past. It is time for work. In Tanzania, they say, hapa ni kazi tu. It is time for work. And therefore, I invite you to have an open mind on the project, not as lawyers, but as Ugandans. And that means that we must have what we call an irreducible minimum. Anyone who comes and says, please remain importing and leave your crude in Hoima underground, that is a red line. That is the enemy of Uganda and Africa. 2, anyone who comes and says, we need to improve here, we are welcome. But as we improve, we are working to move forward. 2, this is our project for all of us. Let us embrace it. Let us also welcome the investors, because when they say FID of 10 to 15 billions, it means there is an investor that has decided to bring 10 billions in your country. Under normal circumstances, that we should do what they do, show some love as Ugandans to that investor, because this person has given an endorsement and he wants to walk with us along the journey of poverty. Last month, I think you saw a report in Monitor where they indicated that our foreign direct investments for this year. A report from, I think, World Trade Organization, something, and Bank of Uganda had significantly increased because of this project. Our GDP is set to increase to almost 60 billion US dollars. From when the Queen left us in 1962, for the last 50 years, we have just arrived at 40. If a project can almost double that in 3-4 years, we should all embrace it and take advantage. And lastly, to really invite you through our president to join that excursion, and you come and witness for yourselves so that we can have a more constructive discussion based on someone who has seen what is on the ground. And to thank Law Society for this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Peter, if we could hear your closing remarks.
Thank you, Edison. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, participants, and thank you, Uganda Law Society, and in particular, the Natural Resources Cluster. I think we need to have more of this so that we keep updating each other. I look forward to the visit in the Graben, so we are able to show you what has been done and the reality of the project. So in conclusion, I won't sound very different from what Ali is saying. I want to call upon all you, our colleagues in the profession, and I note that there are many non-lawyers who attended this webinar as well, so I will speak to you as well, to, as much as possible, participate in this sector. The biggest single project we've had in this country's history, I think, has been Karuma, which is less than $2 billion or thereabout. Here we are talking about 3 projects happening in our lifetime when we are old enough to work, and it's $16 billion in an economy that is 50 billion now, going on to 60 billion. These projects have the capacity to quadruple our GDP in the next 10 to 15 years. And as such, we are really well positioned to participate and grow through these projects. So I will emphasize participate. And Ali, his team, and the entire PAU, myself, Eacop, and our teams are available to support you, our colleagues, in any form of information request, anything that you need to support your participation in the sector. So that's the call I want to make. The projects are real, the money is real, and there is a real opportunity for us to participate. Third, legal services are extremely important in stabilizing investments. Some people may find it difficult to invest if the legal services in a country are not up to speed, and as such, the justice system. So I want us to request that as a profession, we supply the best legal services that we can to the projects and support the projects to ensure that even the judgments that come out of court relating to the project are well argued and well supported and well articulated to the best international standard, to the best standard that we can have. Lastly, I want to commit on behalf of Eacop and on behalf of, and I'm sure Ali will align, that we are here at any time to support Uganda Law Society, to support anybody that requires any form of support, and to ensure that we are all part of this national content story, that from 28% value retained during the exploration phase, we grow to 40% and probably more. I was in Indonesia, and they provide about 95% of the services required for the sector. And they are producing much more crude than we intend to produce. So we can grow that. And so I think we can work with Uganda Law Society to create maybe a learning structure that enables, that's specifically focused on the energy sector, to support the young professionals and even older professionals, so that as legal and other services, we participate and really take a big chunk of these services in this industry. Thank you so much. And I ask you as lawyers that wherever you are, we are gifted in talking, in convincing, in articulating, support these projects. And from a point of knowledge, we've provided some guidelines on where you can find the information. Pick it, read it, support the projects, and we will all benefit at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Ali. I think on behalf of the cluster and on those who are listening, allow me to extend a vote of thanks, my sincerest vote of thanks to you, gentlemen, for taking the time out of your afternoon to come here and articulate these issues, to bring light and heat where necessary, and to open our minds, our ears, and our hearts to this project. I want to salute you as public officers. I want to salute you as patriotic public officers. And I want to salute you as patriotic Ugandans for the time you have taken to come here, and as patriotic members of the Uganda Law Society. I want to salute especially those who joined us, those who posted their questions, those whose questions we couldn't get time to go to. And I just want to say thank you very, very much, gentlemen. I'm informed that we are joined by people from all over the world. So from all of us here to everybody everywhere, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you. And that is the end.